feel free to ask. And of course, we're always interested in answering such. But things, I guess, have changed quite a bit since we were here 5 years ago and gave an update of the school. But as far as the purpose of schools of preaching, things haven't changed. Of course, the schools of preaching exist because of basically three foundational issues outside of the spiritual elements. And that is, number one, the economics. To go to a Christian college right now and try to get a degree in Bible, as you know, is very expensive. My sister-in-law is the secretary to the provost at Freed-Hardeman, and their Bible majors are spending upwards to $52,000, $53,000 a year right now to earn their degree. So do that for 4 years, you're coming out $200,000 in debt unless you had parents that were able to save for it, all that stuff. And then you all know how student loans work. They want their money back in 10 years. So if you owe $200,000 and they want it back in 10 years, that's $20,000 a year. And your first preaching job, you're making $30,000, $35,000 a year. Well, you all do the math. It just doesn't work very well. So we are an alternative because our tuition is free. We raise money from congregations like this and individuals, and the kids come and they study and they leave without debt, so therefore they can afford to go to some of our smaller congregations when they get out of school and, eke out a living like everybody else. So the economics is one reason. Secondly, the schools of preaching are known for their soundness. We stick to the book. Unfortunately, myself, I did not attend a school of preaching, though I've taught at them and worked at them since 1996. But I went to Ohio Valley College in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And if you know anything about our Brotherhood school up there, we had our last graduation in May. They shut the school down because of lack of funding and so forth. And then I transferred to Lipscomb and other places over the years. And, Ohio Valley College, Lipscomb, they're just not what they used to be, unfortunately. Their Bible departments are, as far as they are concerned. So with the schools of preaching, we stick to the book. We go through each and every book of the Bible, and we look at many other classes as well to try to round out their education. And we're also known as technical training schools, meaning we teach them how to preach, how to teach classes, how to do funerals and weddings, how to do visitation. And we're in the process right now of, teaching them even how to do some manual things. Believe it or not, we get these young kids come in today, they don't know anything. And a couple of teachers came to my office the other day. I'm one of the go-to men in that area whenever widows need something. And they're like, can you start taking the students with you and helping them? Last week I had one of the widows call me, and her foundation shook a little bit, and one of her doors wasn't shut. So I'm like, well, I'll be there, tonight. And they're like, well, take some students with you. Teach them these things. And so, I tell them to go get a hammer, and they come back with a wrench. So I don't know. I guess it's like growing up, right, with Dad. So we train them for about every possibility. Teach them how to do radio. Teach them TV, how to blog, all of this stuff. That way, wherever they go, they will be beneficial, and they will be hopefully prepared. So we work with them at that, and we're very grateful to have that opportunity. So these are three reasons why the school exists. Now, the last time I was here, all of our staff was different than this time except for me. And last time I was here, my father was still the director of the school, and he passed away suddenly on December 31st, 2017. We weren't expecting it. I was supposed to be up that Sunday in Canton, Ohio, preaching, and I was headed up there, and we were in Indiana, southern Indiana, so we were going as hard as we could go, and I got a phone call, and they said, you need to come home. So we got home just in time for that. And when that happened, our dean of students, Tavares Armstrong, had been looking for a preaching job, and he's taken one, and now he's preaching down in Marshall, Texas. So we started everything. I turned down the position myself. I didn't want to do it. I've directed schools of preaching before, but there's a lot of politics involved with that. And I have a family, kids at home. And if you've known anything about these type of positions in the brotherhood, a lot of times with great missionaries and great preachers and directors of schools of preaching, they're so busy traveling, going here and there, and they're always dealing with church politics, they lose their children a lot. And, they're too busy trying to save the world that home often doesn't get saved. So I told them, no, I'm not interested in it. And I said, I'll do what I'm doing, and I'll keep doing it. And so we hired Kevin Rhodes. And I know that's a TV, so the pointer's not going to work. Kevin is 2 over from me. And he is the new director of the school. He is originally from Tennessee, Texas area. His father, Orrin, as well, was a director of a school preaching up in Missouri many years ago. Both of them have written many books and do a lot of speaking throughout the brotherhood. And then in between him and me is our academic dean, Pat McIntosh. Pat graduated the school in the mid-'80s. He went on and continued his education, and he's got a PhD in ministry right now, and he's working on a second doctorate as we speak. And he's taught at Amridge and Heritage, Bear Valley, and now he's with us. And we're grateful that he's with us. He does a wonderful job. Roy Gafford, all the way to the end, is our new Dean of Students. And Roy is quite the character. We're glad to have him. He has preached at a small congregation for 10, 15 years. He's been an elder of the Lord's Church for 10, 15 years. He's got a master's in cardiac recovery, and he has a master's in biblical ministry from Cornell. So he's very well educated, very well rounded. He worked for a high school there in Dallas for many years and coached high school football when he was there. He's won 3 state championships, so he thinks he's kind of a big deal down there in Texas. He'll run around with those big old rings on, in the office from time to time. And, he kind of looks like Bill Belichick, but I always tell him, you're not Bill Belichick, Just kind of remind him and humble him a little bit. But anyhow, he does a wonderful job, and grateful to have him. Now, as far as our Spanish department, it has remained the same. Willie Alvarenga, who's standing beside Kevin, and Jesse Martinez, who is beside Roy. They've been with us for many years now, since the beginning of our Spanish department, almost 20 years ago. And Willie is originally from El Salvador, came over as a child, and Jesse Martinez is originally from Mexico, and he came over as a child as well. And Jesse just got his citizenship about a month ago, and he's worked hard on that, and he was very grateful, to get that. And being from Mexico, and I know Americans, we don't follow the World Cup much, but Mexico didn't make it as far as America did. And I asked him, I said, so who are you cheering for? I said, I really want to know. And he wouldn't answer me. So whatever the case, he's a real good guy, personality, always bubbly, always laughing. Now, he's one of those people that you hear before you see, because, he's always yelling or singing or doing something. So anyhow, they make up the foundation of our Spanish department. And here's most of our teachers at the school. I know you're all familiar with Brother Hope, who has a place out here and comes here quite often. Ken has just officially retired from the school, unfortunately. He's been with us a very long time. And those that have years or numbers behind their names, they are graduates of the school themselves, and that's when they graduated. And Randall Morris is there in the chair. I think you all know Randall. Randall used to preach here, or so about 40 years ago, if I recall right. So if you've been here a while, you may remember him. Randall and I are very close. We've been real close for a very long time. Matter of fact, they were needing their yard mowed, and he texted me the other day to find someone to mow their churchyard for them. So when they have problems like that, I guess that's what I'm available for. But Randall, as you all know, as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the greatest minds in the brotherhood. He just has a way with Scripture and way with working the book, and we appreciate him very much. And my wife and I have had a relationship with that congregation going back almost 20 years now. And when I have opportunity, which I have not had in the last 2 years, but when I have opportunity and I'm not teaching a Bible class somewhere on Wednesday night, that's where I attend. And people often ask me, they're like, well, why are you not here? I said, well, if I'm not teaching, I'm going to go hear the best teacher in the DFW area. And so he's at Robinson Road, and he's been there, well, for 20 years since they built that new building. And then I can't remember the name of the congregation before then, but he's been with them a very long time. And he lives with the Cudd family, Tom and Bee Cudd, and they take very good care of him. You couldn't find better caregivers in the world than they are to him. And I don't know how close you are to Randall, but some of us have watched his decline. And, you know, he's to the point now he really can't hardly move anything. But still, he has his mind, and we're grateful for it. Now, here's some of our student body. And I guess, you know, I've showed you all the main presentation before, and so I won't get in all the particulars. But what I thought I would do is just go over our last few student bodies. That way you can see what congregations like this and individuals are supporting, you know, who we're supporting, where they end up and what they're doing, and so forth. And that 9:45 starts got me shaking. I looked up at the clock. I thought, man, I got 10 minutes left. So no, I got a few more minutes, don't I? I want to pass this around before we get to this. I do an email newsletter now. I didn't do that when I was here last time. And I send it out in the middle of the month. And if you'd like to be on the email newsletter list, you can just put your email address there, and I'll add it. And, you know, it gets out anywhere from the 10th to the 18th. You know, I'm not married to a certain date. So, you know, this month, I'll probably be up in Chicago when I'm writing it. I'm supposed to be up there in the middle of this month preaching. So, you know, whenever I get to it. So it is monthly. I'm going to start passing it around here. And if you don't want to put your name on it, that's fine. And just, you know, we'll get it through the auditorium, and I'll add you to the list. Now, as far as our student body, of course, we have graduates every year. And I'm going to start with the 2017 picture. In 2017, I don't know if you could see, yeah, I know it doesn't work on there, but there's a guy in a gray suit in the middle. He suffers with albinism. His name is Ronnie Fisher, Jr. Well, Ronnie Fisher is from just north of Chicago, up in Wisconsin, and he always had a desire to preach. And, you know, he wanted to get the training, but being suffering with albinism, if you know and are familiar with that, typically those who do are blind. Different stages of blindness, but he's to the point, you know, he really can't read and so forth. I mean, he could see figures and things like that. So when his father turned 62, who was a nurse up in Chicago, his father knew of his son's desire, and his father's in the white suit, senior. He decided that he would go ahead and retire early and come down to Fort Worth, be his son's chauffeur, attend the classes with him, help him with his papers and everything. And he did that for 2 years. And I've often used these two as an illustration when it comes to a parent's love. As those of us who are parents know, we're parents until we take our last breath, right? Our kids may not think so, but we are. And we'll do anything for them. And that's evidence of it. So Junior is preaching in Denton, Texas, at the Simmons Street congregation. And he's a very powerful speaker, very knowledgeable in the Word. And since he can't really read, what he has a good habit of doing is he'll call upon men as he's preaching. And he gets to a verse that he once read or quoted, he'll call upon men to stand up and read for him. So what that does is it makes sure that every man is paying close attention, because you don't want to be called upon and you're sitting there in a daydream thinking, wow, this is the last day of deer season. You know, you don't want to be called upon in a situation like that and be off in La La Land. So he does a great job, and we appreciate him. Now behind him, and two pictures, is Michael Wyndham. And he's in a 2017, all the way in the back, and real light-skinned. He's a redhead. And Michael was a sitting judge in McKinney when he decided to come to us. And he's pushing 40 now. And I asked him, you know, why do you do that? You know, why do you take all of those law classes, sit for the LSATs, become a lawyer, run for office, get on the bench, only to get off 2 years later. And I don't know if you're from the McKinney area, but this is what he told me. He said, if I had stayed on the bench, I'd have been lost. And well, when a judge tells me something like that, I want to hear the good stuff, right? So that's what I asked him. I said, so what's going on? And he said his very first day in office, developers from Plano came up to his office and offered him a big old piece of land in the middle of Plano. Just, because they love judges, right? And he knew what that meant. They knew what they were doing. And he's like, if I'd have stayed there, I'd have been in trouble. So he got off the bench. And I don't know if you've heard of the Christian Care Centers down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but there's 2 or 3 big kind of retirement facilities, and they both have congregations there. So he preaches at one of those congregations, and he's been preaching there ever since he graduated. But being a lawyer, I don't know if you've ever heard a lawyer preach, but if you've heard one lawyer preach, you've heard them all preach. They have this same style. It's just like they're delivering their case, and then they get to closing arguments, and, it's just the same with everyone that preaches. So they do a wonderful job. And anyhow, grateful for him. Now, 1, 2, 3 over to the right from him is Joe Nimick. And I wish I had my pointer. I could point up there, but, pointers won't work on TVs. But they will do that. Joe Nimick's preaching in Paris right now at one of the local congregations there. Joe was he was coaching reffing high school football in Dallas, Fort Worth area when he decided to come to the school. But before that, he's really educated. He was teaching university at San Francisco University. He taught at the University of Louisville there in Kentucky. He coached college basketball at San Francisco and at University of Louisville. And, if you know anything about the North is as crazy about basketball as, Texas, Oklahoma is about football. And going to coach at Louisville is like going to coach football at Oklahoma or UT. That's where your best coaches are, Indiana, Kansas, and Louisville, Kentucky. So he coached there under Denny Crum for a long time. And so very educated, teaching college and all that. He decided he wanted to become a preacher when he was 62 years old. So he came our way, and now he's preaching for a congregation there in Paris area. Now the 2018 class, David Sudoff, the guy in the gray suit in the middle with the pink tie, number one, he didn't get the memo, but that's all right. His dad is Cuban. His mother is American. And they met at the consulate office in Mexico City, many years ago, got married, had David, and David was raised in Mexico City. So he speaks perfect Spanish, but he was raised also a very strong and strict Catholic. That's what his father was. And he married a young lady. They moved to America, to San Antonio, Houston, when they were 6, 7, and bounced back and forth. And he married a young lady who was a member of the church, and he was working for the prison down in Huntsville. And if you're familiar with Texas, Huntsville was the roughest one we got, right? And David's just a tiny man, and I've often asked him, how were you able to handle those prisoners and so forth? And he's like, well, I had my ways. But anyhow, he obeyed the gospel message. He attended the school for 2 years, and now he's preaching in Cowan, Tennessee. And he's in Cowan County, Tennessee. And, that's the Bible Belt. My wife and I were there this summer. There are 32 congregations of the Lord's church in that county. And he's at the one in the county seat. 2 or 3 of them are 200 or 300 members, and the rest are 30 to 60 members. And it's just an amazing location where he's at. And then right directly behind him we have Neil Steidoff. He's preaching in West Texas now, but Neil was raised in the church. And not only was he raised in the church, but he went to Freed-Hardeman, and he's got a master's in mathematics. So he went to school to become a math teacher, but then he decided he wanted to preach, so he came our way. He's in Wellington right now, if you all are familiar with that. And he does a wonderful job himself. And then we jump to the 2019 body. And you know, there comes a time, let's just get real now, right? There comes a time when we all realize we're old, right? That was the 2019 class, because Joe Moon, he's little, I would say the little white guy in the middle, but he is. There's Joseph Harris. You all supported Joseph Harris when he attended here, by the way, the small, short black man in the front. So Joe is right behind him. But Joe, when my dad moved back from Africa, when I was in high school, my junior year, we moved to southern Indiana. That's where I met my wife. And Joe's from the community over. And he always calls himself, and my wife calls them cousins. And she's not really happy with that, but it is what it is. But I can remember Joe in diapers, right? And I baptized him into Christ. And then he came to the school, and he married a young girl by the name of Elizabeth. She worked with children's homes up in Indiana and in Kentucky. She went to Freed-Hardeman, graduated from there. He came down to school for 2 years, got his education, and now he's preaching up in a small congregation near Bloomington, Indiana, where IU is. And they got 3 little sons, and she's pregnant with the 4th, and she's pregnant with a daughter. And so we're very grateful. You know, it's awesome to watch a kid in diapers grow up to be a gospel preacher. It's horrible when you're the old man that helped it all happen. But anyhow, grateful for him. We're going to be spending, you know, and my wife's so excited for this, but we're going to be spending Christmas with him. I'll be preaching at that congregation on the 25th, and we'll be grateful to spend time with them and their young boys. But he's a good one. We go over to the 2020 class, and we'll start with the young man in the red sweater. He's preaching down there near Longview, Texas right now. And my wife and I found him in Dublin, Texas. We stopped in to give the presentation. If you know anything about Dublin, that's where Dr. Pepper was born. So we were there giving a presentation, and 6 months later he gave me a phone call. He's like, hey, I'd like to attend, school preaching. And so he did, and he's now preaching full-time there. But he had a master's in journalism, and he was the editor of the newspaper there in Dublin. His wife has a master's in computer sciences, and they got married and so forth. But he was raised a Baptist, and he was converted many years ago. He's from North Texas, a small town not too far from the river. I can't think of the name of the town right now, but he's from there. And so he was converted to the faith, and now he's preaching the gospel. Beside him, the black man, Leonard Graves. Leonard is from Dallas, and he's interesting within himself. He was raised in the church. His uncle, his grandfather, his dad, they were all preachers. And Leonard got an MBA out of college. He graduated with an MBA. Then out of college, he started working with Enron. You all remember that, right? So if you had any money invested in that, please don't slap him silly. It's not his fault. But he worked for Enron out of college, making lots of money. He's single. He's only had one girlfriend his entire life, and she's from California, so they see each other about once every 6 months. So they're not even talking marriage. But he's 43, 44 now, maybe 45. He's just a great guy. But when Enron collapsed, he went and worked for another Fortune 500 company there in the DFW area. And when he showed up for school, he's the only student we've ever had show up not needing support, but also driving a brand new $150,000 Mercedes. So it was worth more than all the vehicles in the parking lot combined. And, so he's done well for himself. Right now, he is working with Halliburton, and he is the associate preacher where his uncle is preaching at. And his uncle's 80 years old at Fordham Road Congregation in Dallas, and his uncle plans on retiring this year. It's supposed to be January 1st. I'll believe it, when it happens, one of those deals. But he'll be taking over for his uncle at that congregation then. So he's a great speaker. He goes down and he travels a lot and preaches all over the brotherhood, and I use him quite often to help me fill in at congregations and so forth. And then in between those two is Preston McEllier. Preston's from Mount Vernon, Texas, not too far from here. He graduated UT Tyler with a double major in English and Spanish, and he was the salutatorian when he graduated there. Now, I know it's UT Tyler, but still, he's a pretty sharp kid, and he's preaching there at Mount Vernon, and just a wonderful young man. Him and his wife just had their first child just a month or two ago. And then some of our most recent graduates. Well, let me go back. I mentioned Joe Harris. Yeah, I know you all supported Joe, the young black man in the middle of the 2019 picture. When he graduated, when all of our students graduate, they already have jobs. He didn't have a job. He was the most picky young man I'd ever seen. And he wanted the perfect congregation. And we kept telling him, you're not going to find a perfect congregation. He's like, I'm going to find one. So it took him a while after he graduated, and he was hired in Ardmore there on the other side of Oklahoma. And he's been there for the last several years. He's got 3 or 4 kids, and he does a really good job, and grateful for him. But you all did personally support him while he was at the school. Now, 2 more recent grads, or 4 of them, have Keaton Schrum and Jason Adair. Keaton is from south of Tulsa, and his dad was a preacher. His brother Keno preaches as well. But Keaton was a police officer, and when he decided to attend the school of preaching, he actually was the ranch manager for your all's governor at the time. I think his name's Stitz or something like that. Stitt. So he was his ranch manager. And so Keaton has a lot of contacts here in Oklahoma. And every now and then, he'd leave class on Friday to head out here to some of the state dinners and so forth that they would have in Oklahoma City. And that's the only time we'd ever see him in a suit, by the way. He wasn't ever going to do that for us, but he would for the governor. But I don't know, it was a year and a half ago. We were in class and his phone started ringing, which number one is a big no-no. And I'm like, well, who's calling you now? And he said, well, it's the governor's son. And by the one, I think it's the one that was just arrested here a week or 2 ago. And I said, the governor's son? He said, yeah. I said, well, okay, go ahead and talk to him. Let's see what he wants. And the kid just called him to see how he was doing in theology school. And but I told him from that, it's neat because there are a lot of members of the Lord's Church in America, not as many as we would want, right? But we have a place everywhere in America. There are members of the church probably near more people of influence than we would ever imagine. And we're grateful for those that are near them, because who knows what type of influence they might have upon them. We read in the Old Testament of men like Nehemiah, who was a cupbearer, and Ezra, who was a famed scribe, and things like that had great influence with kings and queens, and still do today. But he is in Rising, Arkansas. That's where he was hired. He has a wonderful congregation there, about 70 members. My wife and I have been there several times over the years. And when they were looking to hire, they contacted me, and I told them, well, you'd like him. And sure enough, he's there. And then Jason Adair just took the job in Comanche, Texas. And Comanche, they suffered greatly with COVID. They were a congregation of about 60, and they lost half their membership. And he's been there now for several months and trying to get people to come back. And they've had others move into the area that have placed membership there. But he is from Georgetown, Texas. My wife and I found him in Taylor, Texas, outside Austin. Another one of those places I stopped in like this and did a presentation. And then he called me up a few months later said he'd like to attend, and sure enough. Then we have Jose Espinoza and Victor Luna. Jose took the job at the Spanish congregation there in Comanche, and Victor is from Cancun, and he moved back there. Part of my job is to go and visit graduates. I told my wife, we need to go visit this one. Probably visit him like at the end of May when the weather's rough around here, and it never really gets rough around here, but, rough for our area. But anyhow, they both came into the school, as you can see, in their mid-50s, and they're going to do great things for a long time. Now, here's our current English department. We go to 10:30, right? Yeah? And one thing I've noticed about our current English department, this group and the next group coming in, most of them have been converted recently. They're new Christians 4 to 5 years. And to me, that says several things. But number one, it says young men still love the gospel in America. We've got to reach them. Souls can be saved. Number two, it shows souls are being saved. But number three, now we're asking the question, where are our kids? Why are so few of them raised in the church wanting to go into ministry? But all the way to the left is Michael Dawkins. He was not a member of the church 5 years ago. He was converted. He just married a Catholic girl. She was converted, by the way, from Mexico. And her family was strong Catholic, so strong that when they did their wedding rehearsal, her dad marched down the aisle and slapped her in front of everybody and yelled at her for marrying the pagan. So anyhow, things like that are still happening around here. The kid in the blue shirt and the tie beside him is from Seagoville. He's 29 years old, Cody Martin. Cody was not raised in the church, wasn't raised anything. He was taking a philosophy class in college and got interested in things, so he went and visited the congregation in Seagoville, and he was converted to the faith, and now he wants to be a preacher as well. Tyler Hill, his father's a preacher, his grandfather's a preacher, and they're from the other side of Oklahoma, and his sister Faith is right behind him, so she's attending with him. So they're not husband and wife, they're brother and sister. And she is dating Joseph Smith right there by her brother. So we got some famous names there at Brown Trail. We thought about advertising Faith Hill attends the Brown Trail School of Preaching. But then if we advertise Joseph Smith, the head of the Mormons, maybe, I don't know about that. So then all the way over, we have Andrew Patterson. His family lives in Oklahoma right now. His mom's Egyptian, and he studied international affairs at A&M. Sharp kid. He started attending A&M at 16. I think he graduated with his first degree at 18, and he's 25 now, and he's got more degrees than, most people will ever think about having. And his plan is to graduate to school, get a job with the State Department there in Egypt, move there, and to try to work with some, small congregations that are in the area. So that is his plan, and grateful that he's working it out. Michael Oliver, the guy in the white shirt in front of him, Michael was raised Catholic, and he was working for the city in Louisville. And they had a water main break, and he was sent to go work on it. And one of the others sent to go work with him of Mexican descent showed up to help him, and the one of Mexican descent was a member of the church, and they got to talking. And within 6 months later, Michael was baptized, and he attends the Lake Dallas congregation. And he came our way and started back in June. But he was raised Catholic and saved because of a water main. Isn't that neat? That you're out fixing a water main, and that's where you hear the gospel for the very first time. And then we have the man in the white hair and the white beard. He looks out of place, but Jimmy Dorothy, he's 61. He's a widower, and 5 years ago he was a Baptist. He was converted to the faith, told his wife that he wanted to preach, and she had cancer. And one of the very last things she told him before she passed was, you need to go do it. So after she passed away, he gave me a call, and he's with all these young kids right now, but he desires to preach, and we're going to work with him till he can. And here's our current Spanish department. The two in the blue photos, they're from El Salvador. And then John Paul Fallis in the light brown jacket is from Costa Rica, and the other young man is from Mexico. And here's some of our incoming students. They'll be coming in June next year. We have Davin Watley, who's from Mount Pleasant. Tanner Smith, who's from Spokane, or they say Spokane or something like that. You know, I know I'm saying it wrong according to them, but that's all right. Tanner was raised in a home of evolutionist, atheist, and at 15 years old, he started hanging out with one of his running buddies who was a member of the church, and he obeyed the gospel at 15. It caused such a strain in his family. As soon as he graduated high school, he was gone. They despised the fact that he was converted to the faith. And so he is a welder right now, and that's his fiance. She attends a Presbyterian school there in Spokane, and she's going to be graduating in May with a degree in a degree in advertising and communication, and she's a double major. Her second major is in theology. Anyhow, she was converted as well. He bumped into her at a grocery store 2 years ago, and they're going to be getting married as soon as she graduates college, and then they're going to be coming down our area. Then the Orens, father and son, Robert and Cash, they're going to both attend. They're from Arkansas. Norfleet and his daughter, Ashley, who is beside him in a white and black dress, they're going to attend. They're from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And Hayden Baker, who was raised right there at Brown Trail. And we have a few others, but I don't have their pictures yet. Well, we're out of time, but we're grateful to be here with you all today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be here during the worship hour, of course. And we appreciate the congregation here, what you've done for the school over the years. And, I'll just say one more thing, then I'll shut up. Notice the picture of Hayden. Kid's 18 years old. Brown Trail started in 65. So you do the math. We've been around 6 decades thereabout now. And we still have several that graduated in the 60s still in pulpits. So you got the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, zeros, 10s, and we're in the 20s. 7 decades. If you want an investment for the future of the church, I don't know what is better than training these 18, 19, 20-year-olds right now. Because you do the math, this is 2020. Do another 6, 7 decades. We're up into the 2080s and the 2090s. And I mean, the Lord may come before I stop talking. But the reality is, it's a great investment in the future of the church. And we know they all won't remain preachers. Some will not go into ministry. They'll become elders and deacons, Bible class teachers instead. But if you're worried about the tomorrow of the Lord's church, part of the solution is training sound men right now that'll be there for our children and our grandchildren. Well, thank you very much, and appreciate y'all.